I mostly read public domain books here on Glenn Reads Books to You, and they were written a long time ago, so they're usually racist or sexist or bigoted, but in there somewhere is a story, and that's why those stories are famous. Other times, I read works from independent authors, and they're delightfully not racist, but they might have adult language or adult situations, like, making sex. So that's your warning, but I'm sure you're grown up enough to handle it. Don't write to me complaining. Oh, God. Come on. No, today, honestly, I've got a cold. I got a cold from that disease place called Germany. Came back with it. She's been getting worse and worse. My wife is doing really bad. She's been coughing and hacking up a lung like crazy. But the upside is her voice is shot, and she sounds like Scarlett Johansson. So I'm not against it. Welcome to the Glenn Reads Books to You mansion. It's a fun little bit where I pretend to live in a mansion and not just recording in my basement. This is where I read the hottest public domain books and short stories. This week, we're going to read Wuthering Heights, by Emily Brontë. Getting fancy? Want to learn about the author? I hope so. I took all the time to steal this from Wikipedia. Emily Brontë, born July 30th, 1818, and died December 19th, 1848. She was an English novelist and poet who is best known for her only novel, Wuthering Heights, now considered a classic of English literature. She also published a book of poetry with her sisters Charlotte and Anne, and titled Poems by Currer, Ellis, and Acton Bell. All right. Well, with her own poems finding regard as poetic genius. She died of tuberculosis, most likely caused by runoff water from a nearby graveyard. Want to hear some fun facts I stole from the historypress.com? Sure. Emily Brontë was never in love. Wuthering Heights is the greatest book ever written, and one full of passion and love, if of a twisted and sometimes frightening kind, for someone who understood the varieties of love so well. It seems that Emily herself never knew romantic love. She's happiest in her own company, or with her beloved sister Anne. Anne Brontë was the love of Emily's life, with family friend Ellen Nussey, that's a weird last name, describing them as like twins, inseparable companions, and in the very closest sympathy, which never had any interruption. Also, Emily Brontë was sometimes unable to speak in public. All the Brontë sisters could be shy, but Emily was the most reserved of them all. As a child, she and Anne would sometimes hide behind doors or under tables if visitors came to the Haworth parsonage that they called home. This continued into adulthood, so that sometimes, when addressed, Emily would remain silent, completely unable to answer them. Oh, God damn it. I still got a lot of time left. I don't know why I decided to read this book. It's a new year, a new Glenn. So I decided I'm going to read a big one. Gonna read this. I already done the research on the book, so I got stuff to say at the end. Mostly stolen from Spark Notes, to be honest. But with that, I decided I'm diving into the classics. I'm going to get into Kafka next. And I forget what else, but thank God. The grandfather clock. I hate having to wing it. With that, why don't we go down to the library and read the first 5 chapters of this book? Well, there you go. Why don't you get yourself seated? Could you slide the tissue box closer to me, please? Thank you. Thank you very much. It's New Year's Eve right now as I'm sitting here reading to you because I got nothing else to do. My wife's working and I'm just kind of sitting around the house downloading Baldur's Gate 3 because that's what my life has become now. Just, oh, good. They came out with a new video game for Dungeons & Dragons. Everyone's talking about it, so now I'm downloading it because I got nothing else going on in my life. I'm very old, and I have a cold from Europe. Since this New Year's Eve, I hope I start off the year by giving you this cold so that you stop coming over. Chapter 1, 1801. I have just returned from a visit to my landlord, the solitary neighbor that I shall be troubled with. This is certainly a beautiful country, huh? In all England, I do not believe that I could have fixed on a situation so completely removed from the stir of society. A perfect misanthrope's haven, and Mr. Heathcliff and I are such a suitable pair to divide the desolation between us. Oh, a capital fellow. Oh, yeah. He little imagined how my heart warmed toward him when I beheld his black eyes withdraw so suspiciously under their brows, as I rode up, and when his fingers sheltered themselves with a jealous resolution still further in his waistcoat, as I announced my name. Mr. Heathcliff, I said. A nod was the answer. Mr. Lockwood, your new tenant, sir. I do myself the honor of calling as soon as possible after my arrival to express the hope that I have not inconvenienced you by my perseverance in soliciting the occupation of Thrushcross Grange. I could say it. I heard yesterday that you had some thoughts. Thrushcross Grange is my own, sir, he interrupted, wincing. I should not allow anyone to inconvenience me, and if I could hinder it, walk in. The walk in was uttered with closed teeth. He's talking about how great this guy is, and clearly this guy is just filled with rage, and expressed the sentiment, go to the deuce. Even the gate over which he leaned manifested no sympathizing movement to the words, and I think that circumstance determined me to accept the invitation. I felt interested in a man who seemed more exaggeratedly reserved than myself. When he saw my horse's breast fairly pushing the barrier, he did put out his hand to unchain it, and then sullenly preceded me up the causeway, calling, as we entered the court, Joseph, take Mr. Lockwood's horse, and bring up some wine. Here we have the whole establishment of domestics, I suppose, was the reflection suggested by his compound order. No wonder the grass grows up between the flags, and the cattle are only hedge cutters. Joseph was an elderly, nay, an old man. Very old, perhaps through the hale and sinewy. The Lord help us, he soliloquied in an undertone of peevish displeasure, while relieving me of my horse, looking, meantime, in my face so sourly that I charitably conjectured he must need of divine aid to digest his dinner, and his pious ejaculation had no reference to my unexpected advent. Wuthering Heights is the name of Mr. Heathcliff's dwelling, Wuthering being a significant provincial adjective descriptive of the atmospheric tumult to which its station is exposed in stormy weather. The way they wrote back then, so wordy, basically just trying to say Wuthering just means stormy weather. Could have just said that, but back then, boy, they wanted to fill up the pages. Pure, bracing ventilation. They must have been up there all times. Indeed, one may guess the power of the north wind, blowing over the edge, by the excessive slant of a few stunted firs and the end of the house, and by a range of gaunt thorns all stretching their limbs one way, as if craving alms of the sun. Happily, the architect had foresight to build it strong. The narrow windows are deeply set in the wall, and the corners defended with the large jutting stones. Before passing the threshold, I paused to admire a quantity of grotesque carvings lavished over the front, and especially about the principal door, above which, among a wilderness of crumbling griffins and shameless little boys, I detected the date 1500 and the name Hareton Earnshaw. Oh, I would have made a few comments and requested a short history of the place from the surly owner, or at least he admits that he's surly, but his attitude at the door appeared to demand my speedy entrance, or a complete departure, and I had no desire to aggravate his impatience previous to inspecting the penetralium. I'm looking it up. I got time. This is a long book. Penetralia. It's a noun. Innermost parts of the building. Secret hidden place. Well, that was a waste of time. One step brought us into the family's sitting room. Without an introductory lobby or passage, they just call it here the house, in quotes, preeminently. It includes kitchen, parlor, generally. But I believe at Wuthering Heights, the kitchen is forced to retreat altogether into another quarter. At least I distinguished a chatter of tongues and the clatter of culinary utensils. Deep within, I observed no signs of roasting, boiling, or baking about the huge fireplace, nor any glitter of copper saucepans and tin colanders in the walls. One end, indeed, reflected splendidly, both light and heat from ranks of immense pewter dishes, interspersed with silver jugs, and tankards, towering row after row on a vast oak dresser, to the very roof. The latter had never been underdrawn. Its entire anatomy lay bare to an inquiring eye, except where a frame of wood laden with oat cakes and clusters of legs of beef, mutton, ham, concealed it. Above the chimney were sundry villainous old guns and a couple of horse pistols. What's a horse pistol? And by way, what do you do with a horse pistol? By way of ornament, 3 gaudy painted canisters disposed along its edge. The floor was of smooth white stone. The chairs, high-backed, primitive structures, painted green. 1 or 2 heavy black ones lurking in the shade. In an arch under the dresser reposed a huge liver-colored birch pointer. Okay, it's liver-colored. These mean like flesh-colored? And what's a birch pointer? I don't know if I can look this up. Let's try and look it up. Search Wikipedia. Oh, Lord. Nothing. Surrounded by a swarm of squealing puppies and other dogs haunted other recesses. The apartment and furniture would have been nothing extraordinary as belonging to a homely northern farmer with a stubborn countenance and stalwart limbs set out to advantage in knee breeches and gaiters. Such an individual seated in his armchair, his mug of ale frothing on the round table before him, is to be seen in any circuit of 5 or 6 miles among these hills, if you go to the right time after dinner. But Mr. Heathcliff forms a singular contrast to his abode and style of living. He is a dark-skinned Romane in aspect. Instead of sitting there fighting over not saying the bad word, I'm just going to replace them with kinder words. So, a dark-skinned Romane in aspect, in dress and manners and gentleman. That is, as much a gentleman as many a country squire, rather slovenly, perhaps, yet not looking amiss with his negligence, because he has an erect and handsome figure, and rather morose. Possibly some people might suspect him of a degree of underbred pride. I have a sympathetic chord within me that tells me it's nothing of the sort. I know by instinct his reserve springs from an aversion to shadowy displays of feeling, to manifestations of mutual kindliness. He'll love and hate equally under cover and esteem it as species of impertinence, to be loved or hated again. Now, I'm running on too fast. I bestow my own attributes over liberally on him. Oh, Mr. Heathcliff may have entirely dissimilar reasons for keeping his hand out of the way when he meets a would-be acquaintance. Oh, to those which actuate me, let me hope my constitution is almost peculiar. My dear mother used to say I should never have a comfortable home, and only last summer I proved myself perfectly unworthy of one. While enjoying a month of fine weather at the seacoast, I was thrown into the company of the most fascinating creature. A real goddess in my eyes. As long as she took no notice of me, I, quote, never told my love, unquote, vocally. Still, it looks have language. The merest idiot might have guessed that I was over my head and ears. She understood me at last and looked a return. The sweetest of all imaginable looks. What did I do? I confess with shame, shrunk icily into myself, like a snail. At every glance retired colder and further, till finally the poor innocent was led to doubt her own senses, and overwhelmed with confusion at her supposed mistake, persuaded her mamma to decamp. Why would you do that? You totally have a crush on this person, then she shows interest, then you cut her off. Okay, well, hopefully this will explain itself later as the next 300 pages of this book goes on. By this curious turn of disposition, I have gained the reputation of deliberate heartlessness, now undeserved. I alone can appreciate. I took a seat at the end of the hearthstone, opposite that toward which my landlord advanced, and filled up an interval of silence by attempting to caress the canine mother, who had left her nursery, and was sneaking wolfishly to the back of my legs. Oh, her lip curled up. Oh, her white teeth watering for a snatch. Yeah, my caress provoked a long, guttural gnarl. I better let the dog alone, growled Mr. Heathcliff in unison, checking the fiercer demonstrations with a punch of his foot. She's not accustomed to be spoiled, not kept for a pet. Then, striding to a side door, he shouted again, "Hey, Joseph!" Joseph mumbled indistinctly in the depths of the cellar, but gave no intention of ascending, so his master dived down to him, leaving me vis-a-vis the ruffianly bitch and a pair of grim shaggy sheepdogs. Okay, it's bitch. It's bitch in the sense of a female dog, who shared with her a jealous guardianship over all my movements. Not anxious to come into contact with her fangs. I sat still, but imagining that they could scarcely understand tacit insults, I unfortunately indulged in winking and making faces at the trio. And some in turn of my physiognomy so irritated madam that she suddenly broke into a fury and leapt on my knees. I flung her back and hastened to impose the table between us. This proceeding aroused the whole hive. Oh, God! Half a dozen or so four-footed friends, of various sizes and ages, issued from hidden dens to the common center. I felt my heels in coat laps, particular subjects of assault, and parrying off the larger combatants as effectively as I could with a poker. I was constrained to demand aloud acceptance from some of the household in reestablishing peace. Mr. Heathcliff and his man climbed the cellar steps with the vexitush phlegm. Don't know what any of that is, not looking it up. I don't think they moved 1 second faster than usual, though the hearth was an absolute tempest of worrying and yelping. Happily, an inhabitant of the kitchen made more dispatch, a lusty dame, with a tucked-up gown, bare arms, and fire-flushed cheeks, rushed into the midst of us, flourishing a frying pan, and used that as a weapon, and her tongue, to such purpose that the storm subsided magically, and only she remained, having, like a sea after a high wind, when her master entered the scene. "What the devil's the matter?" he asked, eyeing me in a manner that I could ill endure after this inhospitable treatment. "What the devil indeed," I muttered. "The herd of possessed swine could have had no worse spirits in them than those animals of yours, sir. You might as well leave a stranger, with a brood of tigers." "Well, they won't meddle with persons who touch nothing," he remarked, putting the bottle before me and restoring the distant placed table. "The dogs do right to be vigilant. Take a glass of wine?" "No, thank you." "Not bitten, are you?" "If I had been, I would have had set my signet on the bitter." Heathcliff's countenance relaxed to a grin. Come, he said. "You're flurried, Mr. Lockwood. Here, take a little wine. Guests are so exceedingly rare in this house that I and my dogs, I am willing to own, hardly know how to receive them. Your health, sir?" I bowed and returned the pledge, beginning to perceive that it would be foolish to sit sulking for the misbehavior of a pack of curs. Besides, I felt loath to yield the fellow further amusement at my expense, since his humor took that turn. Probably swayed by prudential consideration of the folly of offending a good tenant. I relaxed a little in the laconic style of chipping off his pronouns with auxiliary verbs, and introduced what he supposed would be a subject of interest to me, a discourse on the advantages and disadvantages of my present place of retirement. I found him very intelligent on the topics we touched, and before I went home, I was encouraged so far as to volunteer another visit tomorrow. I evidently wish no repetition of my intrusion. I shall go, notwithstanding. It is astonishing how sociable I feel myself compared with him. Chapter 2. Yesterday afternoon, set and misty and cold. I had half a mind to spend it by my study fire instead of wading through the heath and the mud to Wuthering Heights. On coming up from dinner, however, in parentheses, NB, I dined between 12 and 1 o'clock. The housekeeper, a matronly lady taken as a fixture along with the house, could not or would not comprehend my request that I might be served at 5. What's NB? N.B. Not looking it up. On mounting the stairs with this lazy intention and stepping into the room, I saw a servant girl on her knees, surrounded by brushes and coal scuttles. Oh, and raising an infernal dust as she extinguished the flames with heaps of cinders. This spectacle drove me back immediately. And I took my hat and, after 4 miles' walk, arrived at Heathcliff's garden gate just in time to escape the first feathery flakes of a snow shower. Oh, on that bleak hilltop the earth was hard with a black frost. Oh, and the air made me shiver through every limb. Being unable to remove the chain, I jumped over and running up the flagged causeway, bordered with straggling gooseberry bushes, knocked vainly for admittance until my knuckles tingled. And a dog's howl. Wretched inmates, I ejaculated mentally. You deserve perpetual isolation for your species, for your churlish inhospitality. At least I would not keep my doors barred in the daytime. I don't care. I will get in. Is he still saying that in his mind? So resolved, I grasped the latch and shook it vehemently. Oh, vinegar-faced Joseph projected his head from around the window of the barn. What are ye for? He shouted. To master down it fouled. I''T' fouled. I don't know what that... Why do people do this in books? Go round the end o' to Lath, if ye want to spake to him. Is there nobody inside to open the door? I hallooed responsibly. There's no but to missus, and she'll not open to an ye make your flaysome dins till neat. I hate this. Why do they do this back then? Why? Cannot you tell her who I am, Joseph? Oh, nor me. I hae no hand wit, muttered the head, vanishing. I literally don't know what he's saying. When they start doing this, like, phonetic writing of people's, like, the way they talk and stuff, I can sort of figure out what's going on. I have no idea what Joseph said. It's a one-sided conversation as far as I'm concerned. The snow began to drive thickly. I seized the handle to essay another trial when a young man, without a coat and shouldering a pitchfork, appeared in the yard behind. He hailed me to follow him, and after marching through a wash house, a paved area containing a coal shed, pump, and pitch cot, we at length arrived in the huge, warm, cheerful apartment where I was formerly received. Oh, it glowed delightfully in the radiance of an immense fire, compounded of coal, peat, and wood. And near the table, laid for a plentiful evening meal, I was pleased to observe the Mrs., in quotes, an individual whose existence I had never previously suspected. I bowed, waited, thinking she would bid me to take a seat. She looked at me, leaning back in her chair, and remained motionless and mute. Rough weather, I remarked. I'm afraid, Mrs. Heathcliff, the door must bear the consequence of your servant's leisure and attendance. I had hard work to make them hear me. She never opened her mouth, and I stared. She stared also. Anyway, she kept her eyes on me in a cool, regardless manner, exceedingly embarrassing and disagreeable. Sit down, said the young man gruffly. He'll be in soon. I obeyed, and hemmed, and called the villain Juno, who deigned at the second interview to move the extreme tip of her tail in token of owning my acquaintance. Beautiful animal, I commenced again. Do you intend parting with the little ones, madam? They're not mine, said the amiable hostess, more repellingly than Heathcliff could have replied. Your favorite are among these? I continued, turning an obscure cushion full of something like cats. Strange choice of favorites, she observed scornfully. Unluckily, it was a heap of dead rabbits. Oh, gross. I hemmed once more and drew closer to the hearth, repeating my comment on the wilderness of the evening. Yeah, you should not have come out, she said, rising and reaching for the chimney piece, 2 of the painted canisters. Her position before was sheltered from the light now, and I had a distinct view of her whole figure and countenance. She was, slender, and apparently scarcely past girlhood, gross and admirable form, and a more exquisite little face than I had ever had the pleasure of beholding. Small features, very fair, flaxen, ringlets, or rather golden, hanging loose on her delicate neck. I hate this, she's barely past girlhood. And eyes. Oh, had they been agreeable in expression, it would have been irresistible. Fortunately, for my susceptible heart, the only sentiment they evinced hovered between scorn and a kind of desperation, singularly unnatural to be detected there. The canisters were almost out of her reach, and I made a motion to aid her. She turned upon me as a miser might turn if anyone attempted to assist him in counting his gold. I don't want your help, she snapped. I can get him for myself. I beg your pardon, I replied. Were you asked to tea? She demanded, trying an apron over her black frock and standing with a spoonful of a leaf poised over that spot. Oh, I should be glad to have a cup, I answered. Were you asked? She repeated. No, I said, half smiling. You are the proper person to ask me. There she flung the tea back, spoon and all, and resumed her chair in a pet. Her forehead corrugated, and her red underlip pushed out, like a child, ready to cry. New Year. Meanwhile, the young man had slung on his person a decidedly shabby upper garment, and, erecting himself before the blaze, looked down upon me from the corner of his eyes for all the world as if there was some mortal feud, unavenged between us. I began to doubt whether he were a servant or not. His dress and speech were both rude, entirely devoid of their superiority observable in Mr. and Mrs. Heathcliff. His thick brown curls were rough, and uncultivated. His whiskers encroached bearishly over his cheeks, and his hands were embrowned like those of a common laborer. Still, his bearing was free, almost haughty, and he showed none of the domestic assiduity in attending the lady of the house. In the absence of clear proofs of his condition, I deemed it best to abstain from noticing his curious conduct, and 5 minutes afterwards, the entrance of Heathcliff reviled me in some measure from my uncomfortable state. You see, sir, I am come, according to promise, I exclaimed, assuming the cheerful. And I fear I shall be weather-bound for half an hour, if you can afford me shelter during that space. Yeah, half an hour, he said, shaking his white flakes from his clothes. I wonder you should select the thick of a snowstorm to bramble about it. Do you know that you run a risk of being lost in the marshes? People familiar with the moors often miss their road on such evenings, and I can tell you there is no chance of a change at present. Well, perhaps I can get a guide among your lads, and he might stay at the Grange till morning. Could you spare me one? No, I will not. Oh, indeed. Well, then I must try my own sagacity. Umph. Okay. Are you gonna make tea? I demanded, he of the shabby coat shifting his ferocious gaze from me to the young lady. Is he to have any? She asked, appealing to Heathcliff. Get it ready, will you? Was the answer, uttered so savagely that I started. The tone in which the words were said revealed a genuine bad nature. I no longer felt inclined to call Heathcliff a capital fellow. When the preparations were finished, he invited me with, now, sir, bring forward your chair. We shall all, including the rustic youth, drew round the table, an austere silence prevailing while we discussed our meal. I thought, if I had caused the cloud, that was my duty to make an effort to dispel it. They could not have every day to sit so grim and taciturn. It's impossible, however ill-tempered they might be, that the universal scowl they wore was their everyday in countenance. It's strange, I began, in the interview of swallowing one cup of tea and receiving another. It's strange How custom can mold our tastes and ideas. How many could not imagine the existence of happiness in a life of such complete exile from the world that you spend. Mr. Heathcliff, yet I'll venture to say that surrounded by your family, with your amiable lady as the providing genius over your home and heart. My amiable lady, he interrupted with an almost diabolical sneer in his face. Where is she, my amiable lady? Mrs. Heathcliff, your wife, I mean. Oh, well, yes. You would admit that her spirit has taken the post of a mystery angel. Oh, the guards, the fortunes of Wuthering Heights, even when her body is gone. Is that it? Perceiving myself in a blunder, I attempted to correct it. I might have seen that there was too great a disparity between the ages of the parties to make it likely that they were man and wife. Yeah, she's not even an adult. She's still a kid. One was about, 40, a period of mental vigor at which men seldom cherish the delusion of being married for love by girls. That dream is reserved for the solace of our declining years. The other did not look 17. Oh, then it flashed upon me. I had a clown at my elbow, who's drinking his tea out of a basin and eating his bread with unwashed hands. Maybe your husband, Heathcliff Jr. Of course. Oh, here's the consequence of being buried alive. She has thrown herself away upon that boar from sheer ignorance that better individuals existed. It's a sad pity. I must beware how I cause her to regret her choice. The last reflection may seem conceited, and it was not. My neighbor struck me as bordering on repulsive. Repulsive! I knew, through experience, that I was tolerably attractive. Yes. Mrs. Heathcliff is my daughter-in-law, said Heathcliff, corroborating my surmise. Jeez. He turned, and as he spoke, a peculiar look in her direction. A look of hatred. Unless he has the most perverse set of facial muscles that will not, like those of other people, interpret the language of his soul. I love that line. That's pretty good. Just that, unless his face is all fucked up and he can't express feelings normally. Certainly I see now you are the favored possessor of the beneficent fairy, I remarked, turning to my neighbor. This is, of course, worse than before. The youth grew crimson and clenched his fist. With every appearance of a meditated assault. I may seem to recollect himself presently and smothered the storm in a brutal curse, muttered on my behalf, which, however, I took care not to notice. Unhappy in your conjecture, sir, observed my host. We neither of us have the privilege of owning your good fairy. Her mate is dead, and I said she was my daughter-in-law. Therefore, she must have married my son. And this young man is not my son, assuredly. Heathcliff smiled again, as if it were rather too bold to jest to attribute the paternity of that bear to him. My name is Hareton Earnshaw, growled the other, and I'd counsel you to respect it. Well, I've shown no disrespect, was my reply, laughing internally at the dignity at which he announced himself. He fixed his eye. I kind of like this, too. He's basically shitting on the people in front of him. In all this Victorian language, it's basically like, look at this asshole. He fixed his eye on me longer than I cared to return the stare, for I fear I might be tempted either to box his ears, or render my hilarity audible. I began to feel unmistakably out of place in that pleasant family circle. The dismal spiritual atmosphere overcame and more than neutralized the glowing physical comforts around me, and I resolved to be cautious how I ventured under those rafters a third time. The business of eating being concluded, and no one uttering a word of sociable conversation, I approached a window to examine the weather. A sorrowful sight I saw. Dark night coming down prematurely, The skies and hills mingled in one bitter whirl of wind and a suffocating snow. I don't think it's possible for me to get home now without a guide, I could not help exclaiming. The roads will be buried already, and if they were bare, I could scarcely distinguish a foot in advance. Hareton, drive those dozen sheep into the barn porch. They'll be covered and left in the fold all night. And put a plank before them, said Heathcliff. How must I do? I continued with rising irritation. There's no reply to my question, and I'm looking round, and I saw Joseph bringing in a pail of porridge for the dogs. Mrs. Heathcliff leaning over the fire, diverting herself with the burning of a bundle of matches which had fallen from the chimney piece as she restored the tea canister to its place. Oh, the former, when he had deposited his burden, took a critical survey of the room and in cracked tones grated out, I wonder how ye can fashion to stand thar I idleness on war. When all of M's gone out, bud yeah or nort. And it's no use talking. Yeah, I'll never mind your ill ways, but go right to the devil, like your mother afore ye. Well, that's kind of harsh. I actually could make that one out. I imagined for a moment that this piece of eloquence was addressed to me, and sufficiently enraged, I stepped toward the aged rascal with the intention of kicking him out into the door. Mrs. Heathcliff, however, checked me by her answer. You scandalous old hypocrite, she replied. Oh, you're not afraid of being carried away bodily whenever you mention the devil's name. I warn you to refrain from provoking me, or I'll ask your abduction as a special favor. Stop! Exclamation point. Look here, Joseph, she continued, taking a long, dark book from the shelf, and I'll show you how far I progressed in the black arts. And I shall be soon competent to make a clear house of it. The red cow didn't die by chance, and your rheumatism can hardly be reckoned among the provincial visitations. Oh, wicked, wicked, gasped the elder. May the Lord deliver us from evil. No, reprobate, you are a castaway. Be off, or I'll hurt you seriously. I'll have you all mottled in wax and clay, and the first who passes the limits I shall, and I will not say that he shall be done to, but you'll see, I'll go. I'm looking at you. With the little witch put on a mock malignity. I got a cold. Into her beautiful eyes. And Joseph, trembling with sincere horror, hurried out, praying and ejaculating wicked as he went. Oh, I thought her conduct must be prompted by a series of dreary fun, and now that we are alone, I endeavored to interest her in my distress. Mrs. Heathcliff, I said earnestly, you must excuse me for troubling you, I presume because with that face, I'm sure you cannot help being good-hearted. Do point out some landmarks by which I may know my way home. I have no idea how to get there. Then you would have to how to get to London. Take the road you came, she answered, ensconcing herself in a chair with a candle. The long book open before her. It is brief advice, but as sound as I can give. Now then, if you hear me being discovered dead in a bog or a pit full of snow, your conscience won't whisper that it's partly your fault. Well, how so? I cannot escort you. They wouldn't let me go to the end of the garden wall. You! Exclamation point. I should be sorry to ask you to cross this threshold for my convenience in such a night, I cried. I want you to tell me the way, not show it, or else persuade Mr. Heathcliff to give me a guide. Oh, there is himself, Earnshaw, Zillah, Joseph, and I. Which would you have? Well, there's no boys at the farm? Oh, he just thinks there's a bunch of shirtless boys hanging around the farm. No, those are all. Well, then it follows that I am compelled to stay. Although you may settle with your host, I have nothing to do with it. I hope it'll be a lesson to you to make no more rash journeys on those hills, cried Heathcliff's stern voice from the kitchen entrance. As to stay here, I don't keep accommodation for visitors. You must share a bed with Hareton or Joseph if you do. I can sleep in a chair in this room, I replied. No, a stranger is a stranger. Be rich or poor, and it will not suit me to permit anyone with a range of place while I'm off guard, said the unmannerly wretch. With this insult, my patience was at an end. I uttered an expression of disgust and pushed past him into the yard, running against Earnshaw in my haste. It was so dark that I could not see the means of an exit, and as I wandered around, I heard another specimen of their civil behavior amongst each other. At first, the young man appeared, about to befriend me. Well, I'll go with him as far as the park, he said. You'll go with him to hell, exclaimed the master, whoever relation he bore. And who is he to look after the horses, eh? A man's life is more consequence than one's evening neglect of the horses. Somebody must go, murmured Mrs. Heathcliff, more kindly than I expected. Not at your command, replied Horton. And if you set store on him, you better be quiet. Well, then I hope this ghost will haunt you, and I hope Mr. Heathcliff will never get another tenant till the Grange is in a ruin, she answered sharply. Yeah, hearken, shoes cursing on him, muttered Joseph, toward whom I had been steering. He sat within earshot, milking the cows. by the light of a lantern, which I seized unceremoniously, and calling out that I would send it back tomorrow, rushed to the nearest poster. Maester, he's stealing the lantern, shouted an ancient, pursuing my retreat. Hey, Gnasher, hey, dog, hey, wolf, hold him. On opening the little door, 2 hairy monsters flew at my throat, bearing me down and extinguishing the light, while a mingled guffaw from Heathcliff and Hareton put the copestone on my rage and humiliation. Fortunately, the beasts seemed more bent on stretching their paws and yawning and flourishing their tails than devouring me alive. But they would suffer no resurrection, and I was forced to lie till their malignant masters pleased to deliver me. Then, hatless and trembling with the wrath, I ordered the miscreants to let me out, on their peril to keep me 1 minute longer, with several incoherent threats of retaliation that, in their indefinite depth of virility, smacked of King Lear. The vehemence of my agitation brought on copious bleeding at the nose, and still Heathcliff laughed, and still I scolded. I don't know what could have concluded the scene, and there had not been one person at hand rather than more rational than myself and more benevolent than my entertainer. This was Zillah, the stout housewife, who at length issued forth to inquire into the nature of the uproar. She thought that some of them had been laying violent hands on me, and not daring to attack her master, she turned her vocal artillery against the younger scoundrel. Well, Mr. Earnshaw, she cried, I wonder what you'll have to do it for next. Are we gonna murder folk on our very doorstones? I see this house will never do for me. Look at the poor lad. He's fair choking. Wisht. You mustn't go on so. Come in, and I'll cure that. There now, hold ye still. With these words, she suddenly splashed a pint of icy water down my neck and pulled me into the kitchen. Mr. Heathcliff followed, in his accidental merriment expiring quickly in his habitual moroseness. I was sick exceedingly and dizzy and faint, and thus compelled perforce to accept lodgings under his roof. And he told Zillah to give me a glass of brandy, and then passed on to the inner room, while she condoled me with a sorry predicament, and having obeyed his orders, whereby I was somewhat revived, ushered me to bed. Chapter 3. While leading the way upstairs, she recommended that I should hide the candle and not make a noise, for her master had an odd notion about the chamber she would put me in, and never let anybody lodge there willingly. I asked the reason. She did not know. She answered she had only lived there a year or two, and they had so many queer goings-on, and she could not begin to be curious. Too stupefied to be curious myself, I fastened the door and glanced round for the bed. The whole furniture consisted of a chair, a clothes press. What's a clothes press? I got time. This is a long book. I can look this stuff up. Nothing on Wikipedia. Come on. Nothing for translation, nothing in the dictionary. Well, we'll never know exactly what a clothes press is. And I think the author probably just made it up. And a large oak case with squares cut out near the top resembling coach windows. Oh, having approached this structure, I looked inside and perceived it to be a singular sort of old-fashioned couch. Very conveniently designed to obviate the necessary for every member of the family having a room to himself. In fact, it formed a little closet, a ledge for a window, which it enclosed and served as a table. I slid back the paneled sides and got in with my light, pulled them together again, and felt secure against the vigilance of Heathcliff and everyone else. The ledge, where I placed my candle, had a few mildewed books piled up in one corner, and it was covered with the writings scratched on the paint. The writing, however, was nothing but a name repeated in all kinds of characters. Large and small. Catherine Earnshaw. Here and there varied to Catherine Heathcliff, and then again to Catherine Linton. In vapid listlessness, I leaned my head against the window and continued spelling over Catherine Earnshaw, Heathcliff, Linton, till my eyes closed. And they had not rested 5 minutes when a glare of white letters started from the dark, as vivid as specters. The air swarmed with Catherines, and rousing myself to dispel the obtrusive name, I discovered my candlewick reclining on one of the antique volumes and perfuming the place with the odor of roasted calf skin. Gross. I snuffed on it, and very ill at ease. This guy's just casually almost lighting the house on fire. Were people that lazy back then with their flames and their torches and their candles? I snuffed it off, and very ill at ease under the influence of cold and lingering nausea, sat up and spread open the injured tome on my knee. Oh, it was a testament, a lean-in type. In lean type. I said that weird. I have a cold, and smelling dreadfully musty, a flyleaf bore the inscription, Catherine Earnshaw, her book. And the date of some quarter of a century back. I shut it. Took up another and another until I had examined all. Catherine's library was a select, and its state of dilapidation proved to have been well used, though not altogether for a legitimate purpose. Scarcely one chapter had escaped a pen and ink commentary, at least the appearance of one, covering every morsel of blank that the printer had left. Some were detached sentences. Other parts took the form of a regular diary, scrawled in an ununiform, childish hand. And at the top of an extra page, quite a treasure probably when first lighted on, I was greatly amused, and to behold, an excellent caricature of my friend Joseph, rudely yet powerfully sketched. An immediate interest kindled within me for the unknown Catherine, and I began forthwith to decipher her faded hieroglyphics. An awful Sunday, commenced the paragraph beneath. I wish my father were back again. Hindley is a detestable substitute. His conduct to Heathcliff is atrocious. H. Period. They're probably doing that thing where they do the first letter of someone's name to keep them anonymous. That's something that happens in a lot of old books, but I don't know what that's supposed to mean. His conduct to Heathcliff is atrocious. M-H. And I are going to rebel. We took our initiatory step this evening. All day had been flooding with rain. We could not go to church, so Joseph must needs to get up a congregation in the garret, and while Hindley and his wife basked downstairs before a comfortable fire, doing anything but reading their Bibles, I'll answer for it, Heathcliff, myself, and the unhappy plowboy were commanded to take our prayer books and mount. We were ranged in a row on a sack of corn, groaning and shivering, and hoping that Joseph would shiver too, so that he might give us a shortened homily for his own sake. Oh, a vain idea! Exclamation point. The service lasted precisely 3 hours, and yet my brother had to face to exclaim when he saw us descending. Oh, what, done already? On Sunday evenings, we used to be permitted to play if we did not make much noise. Now a mere titter is sufficient to send us into corners. You forget you have a master here, says the tyrant, and I'll demolish the first who puts me out of temper. I insist on perfect sobriety and silence. Oh, boy, was that you, Francis, darling? Pull his hair as you go by. I heard him snap his fingers. Francis pulled his hair heartily and then went and seated herself on her husband's knee. And there they were, like two babies, kissing and talking nonsense by the hour. Foolish palaver that we should be ashamed of. We made ourselves as snug as our means allowed in the arch of the dresser, and I had just fastened our pinafores together and hung them up for a curtain, when in comes Joseph on an errand from the stables. Oh, he tears down my handiwork, boxes my ears, and croaks. To Maester, oh God, I hate when they do this. To Maester, no but just buried, and Sabbath not o'ered, und to sound o to gospel still ire lungs. And ye dar be lacking. Shame on ye. Sit ye down, ill childer. There's good books enough, if you read 'em. Sit ye down, and think o your souls. Well, I kind of got the last part. Saying this, he compelled us to square our positions that we might receive from the far-off fire a dull ray to show us the text of the lumber he thrust upon us. I cannot bear the employment. I took my dingy volume by the scroop. Scroop? What's a scroop? I got a lot of time. Nothing. And dictionary? Nothing. This person's just making up words. And hurled it into the dog kennel, vowing I hated a good book. Heathcliff kicked his into the same place. Then there was a hubbub. Master Hindley, shouted our chaplain, Maester, come hither. Miss Cathy's riven the back off the helmet o' salvation. On Heathcliff's paused his fit onto first part o' brood way of destruction. It's fair flaysome that ye let him go on this gate. Ich, to old man wad had laced him properly. But he's gone. Hindley hurried up from the paradise of the earth and, seizing one of us by the collar and the other by the arm, hurled both into the back kitchen, where Joseph asseverated old Nick would fetch us as sure as we were living, and so comforted, we each sought a separate nook to await his advent. I reached this nook, and a pot of ink from the shelf, and pushed the house door ajar to give me light. And I have got the time on with writing for 20 minutes. But my companion is impatient and proposes that we should appropriate the diary woman's cloak. And we should have a scamper on the moors under its shelter. A pleasant suggestion. And then, if the surly, I can't speak, I got a cold, old man come in, he may believe his prophecy verified. We cannot be damper or colder in the rain than we are here. Well, I suppose Catherine fulfilled the project, for the next sentence took up another subject. She waxed lachrymose. Look at that one up. Oh, finally, we got a definition. Lachrymose. Tearful or given to weeping. She was pink-eyed and lachrymose. No, well, that was stupid. Oh, how little did I dream that Hindley would ever make me cry so, she wrote. My head aches, till I cannot keep it on the pillow, and I still can't give over. Oh, poor Heathcliff. Hindley calls him a vagabond, and won't let him sit with us, nor eat with us anymore, and he says he and I must not play together, and threatens to turn him out of the house if we break his orders. Oh, he has been blaming our father, how dare he, for treating H too liberally, and swears he will reduce him to the right place. Well, I began to nod drowsily over the dim page. My eye wandered from manuscript to print, and I saw a red ornamented title, 70 times 7 in the first of the 71st, a pious discourse delivered by the Reverend Jabez Branderham in the chapel of Gimmerdin So. And while I was half-consciously worrying my brain to guess what Jabez Branderham would make of the subject, I sank back in bed and fell asleep. Alas, for the effects of bad tea and bad temper. But what else could it be that made me pass such a terrible night? Oh, I don't remember another thing that I can at all compare with it, since I was capable of suffering. I began to dream almost before I ceased to be sensible of my locality, and I thought it was morning. I set out on my way home with Joseph for a guide. The snow lay yards deep in our road, and as we floundered on, my companion wearied me with constant reproaches that I had not brought a pilgrim's staff, telling me that I could never get into the house without one, and boastfully flourishing a heavy-headed cudgel, which I understood to be so denominated. For a moment I considered it absurd that I should need such a weapon to gain admittance into my own residence. Then a new idea flashed across me. Oh, I was not going there. Oh, we were journeying to hear the famous Jabez Branderham preach. Oh, burp, from the text, 70 times 7. And either Joseph, the preacher, or I had committed the first of 71st, and we were publicly exposed and be excommunicated. We came to the chapel, and I had passed it, really in my walks. Oh, Lord. Once or thrice. No, it lies in a hollow between two hills. An elevated hollow near a swamp. Oh, whose peaty moisture is said to answer all purposes of embalming on the few corpses deposited there. The roof had been kept while hitherto, but as a clergyman's stipend is only £20 per annum, and for the house with 2 rooms, threatening speedily to determine into one, no clergyman will undertake the duties of pastor, especially if it is currently reported that his flock would rather let him starve than increase the living by 1 penny from their own pockets. Oh, however, in my dream, Jabez had a full and attentive congregation, and he preached. Good God, what a sermon, divided into into 490 parts, each fully equal to an ordinary address from the pulpit, and each discussing a separate sin. Where he searched for them, I cannot tell. He had a private manner of interpreting the phrase. It seemed necessary the brothers should sin different sins on every occasion. They were the most curious character, odd transgressions that I have ever imagined previously. How weary I grew, how I writhed, and yawned, and nodded, and revived. How I pinched and pricked myself and rubbed my eyes and stood up, sat down again, and nudged Joseph to inform me if he would ever have done. I was condemned to hear all out. Finally, he reached for the, quote, first of the 71st. A crisis. A sudden inspiration descended upon me. I was moved to rise and denounce Jabez Branderham as the sinner of the sin that no Christian need pardon. Sir, I exclaimed, sitting here within these four walls at one stretch, I have endured and forgiven 490 heads at your discourse. 70 times, 7 times have I plucked up my hat and been about to depart. 70 times, 7 times have you preposterously forced me to resume my seat. And 491st is too much. Fellow martyrs, have at 'em. Drag him down and crush him to atoms. That is the place which knows him may know him no more. Thou art the man, cried Jabez, after a solemn pause, leaning over his cushion. 70 times, 7 times didst thou gapingly contort thy visage. 70 times 7 did I take counsel with my soul. Lo, this is human weakness. This also may be absolved. The first of the 71st is come. Brethren, execute upon him the judgment written. Such honor shall have all his saints. With that concluding word, all the whole assembly, exalting their pilgrim staves, rushed round me in a body, and I, having no weapon to raise in self-defense, commenced grappling with Joseph, my nearest and most ferocious assailant, for his, in confluence with the multitude, several clubs crossed, blows aimed at me, fell on other sconces, and presently the whole chapel resounded with rappings and counter-rappings. Every man's hand was against his neighbor, and Branderham, unwilling to remain idle, poured forth his zeal in a shower of loud taps on the boards of the pulpit, which responded so smartly that, at last, to my unspeakable relief, they woke me. And what was it that had suggested the tremendous tumult? What had played Jabez's part in the row? Merely the branch of a fir tree that touched my lattice as the blast wailed by, and rattled its dry scones against the panes. And I listened, and doubtingly in an instant, detected the disturber, and then turned and dozed, and dreamt again, and if possible, still more disagreeably than before. I wasn't exactly clear that this was a dream till right now. I thought maybe he actually got up in the morning and started walking, and then Joseph was being a creep. But okay, glad it was a dream. This time I remembered I was lying in the oak closet, and I heard distinctly the gusty wind and the driving of the snow. I heard also the fir bough repeat its teasing sound and ascribed it to the right cause. But it annoyed me so much that I resolved to silence it, if possible, and I thought I rose and endeavored to unhasp the casement. The hook was soldered onto the staple, a circumstance observed by me when awake, but forgotten, and I must stop it nevertheless, I muttered, knocking my knuckles through the glass and stretching my arm out to seize the important branch, instead of which my fingers closed on the fingers of a little ice-cold hand. The intense horror of nightmare came over me, and I tried to draw back my arm, but the hand clung onto it. A most melancholy voice sobbed, "Let me in, let me in." "Who are you?" I asked, struggling meanwhile to disengage myself. "Catherine Linton," it replied, shiveringly. Why did I think of Linton? I had read Earnshaw 20 times for Linton. I've come home, and I've lost my way on the moor. As it spoke, I discerned obscurely a child's face looking through the window. Terror made me cruel, and finding it useless to attempt shaking the creature off, I pulled at its wrist on a broken pane and rubbed it to and fro until the blood ran down and soaked the bedclothes. Still it wailed, "Let me in," and it maintained a tenacious grip, almost maddening me with fear. "Well, how can I said at length. "Let me go if you want me to let you in." The fingers relaxed, and I snatched mine through the hole hurriedly, piled up the books in a pyramid against it, and stopped my ears to exclude the lamentable prayer. I seemed to keep them closed above a quarter of an hour, and yet the instant I listened again, there was the doleful cry moaning out. Begone, I shouted. I'll never let you in, not if you beg for 20 years. It's 20 years, mourned the voice. 20 years I've been a waif, for 20 years. Thereat began a feeble scratching outside, and a pile of books moved as if thrust forward. I tried to jump up, but I could not stir a limb, and so yelled aloud in a frenzy of fright. To my confusion, I discovered the yell was not ideal. Hasty footsteps approached my chamber door, and somebody pushed it open. With the vigorous hand, and a light glimmered through the squares at the top of the bed, and I sat shuddering yet and wiping the perspiration from my forehead. The intruder appeared to hesitate, and muttered to himself. At last, he said, in a half-whisper, plainly not expecting an answer. Is anyone here? I considered it best to confess my presence, for I knew Heathcliff's accents. I feared he might search further if I kept quiet. With this intention, I turned and opened the panels, and I shall not soon forget the effect my action produced. Heathcliff stood near the entrance, in his shirt and trousers, with a candle dripping over his fingers, and his face as white as a wall behind him. The first creak of the oak startled him like an electric shock, and the light leaped from the hold to a distance of some feet, and his agitation was so extreme that he could hardly pick it up. Well, that seems like a good place to take a little break. Why don't we go down to the basement, where we can learn about the latest upcoming Penguin Random House books. There you are. Why don't you take a seat on this one little folding chair underneath the naked light bulb. This isn't creepy. It's fine. It's a way for me to practice my guitar and tell you about new, exciting books from Penguin Random House, like Upside Down, a novel by Danielle Steele. About Upside Down, #1 New York Times best-selling author Danielle Steele. That's one where I'd actually believe that Danielle Steele, or whatever series of actual authors are taking on that name, has been a New York Times best-selling author. Probably doesn't have to pay their way to get into it like everyone else does, because this Danielle Steele person's been writing for like 50 years. Delivers a poignant novel about a mother and a daughter who must repair their relationship and find a way to follow their hearts. Oscar-winning actress Ardrith Law is a Hollywood icon. That's nice. Radiant at 62, she is the epitome of a glamour and highly respected artist. But her success has come at a price. She has a strained relationship with her daughter, Morgan, who at 38 still blames Ardith for putting her career before being a mother. Morgan is a successful plastic surgeon in New York City, and the distance from Ardith's Bel Air mansion is not lost on either of them. Ardith became a single mother when Morgan was 7. After her unfaithful husband died in a helicopter accident, God, that seems random. In recent years, she has found amiable companionship with fellow actor Bill West. But Ardith's comfortable world is turned upside down when she hires a temporary personal assistant, Josh Gray, while Bill is away filming in London. Josh's rough around the edges persona is the opposite of what Ardith is used to. But an unexpected tragedy brings them closer, stirring up conflicting feelings in her for this younger man. Meanwhile, in New York, Morgan is swept off her feet by world-renowned TV anchorman Ben Ryan. This is so random. Although more than 2 decades her senior, Ben is handsome, charismatic, and just a smitten with Morgan. But when a blackmail scheme, this is so random, puts his career and then the relationship on the line, Morgan doesn't know where to turn. Perhaps, to her mother. As each woman navigate an unconventional romance, they cautiously approach each other on new terms and attempt to put aside their past for a new future. In Upside Down, Danielle Steele tells an unforgettable story of bold choices, second chances, and the hope of reconciliation. That was random as hell. That's Upside Down by Danielle Steele. It's coming out January 2nd for $28.99 in hardcover. You get it from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Bookshop.org, Hudson Booksellers, Powell's, Target, and besides every gas station you ever walk into or every grocery store you ever walk into, of course you're going to find it on the shelves of Walmart. With that, let's get back upstairs and read a whole another hour's worth of this book. Well, there you are. Why don't you get yourself settled? It's only your guest, sir, I called out, desirous to spare him the humiliation of exposing his cowardice further. I had the misfortune to scream my sleep, owing to a frightful nightmare, and I'm sorry I disturbed you. Oh, God confound you, Mr. Lockwood. I wish you were at the... commenced my host, setting the candle on the chair, because he found it impossible to hold it steady. Who showed you up to this room? He continued, crushing his nails into his palms and grinding his teeth to subdue the maxillary convulsions. Who was it? Oh, I've got a good mind to turn them out of the house at this moment. It was your servant, Zilla. What a dick. Just totally sold that person out. I replied, flinging myself onto the floor and rapidly resuming my garments. Oh, I should not care if you did, Mr. Heathcliff. She richly deserves it. What the hell? I suppose that she wanted to get another proof that this place was haunted at my expense. Well, it is. Swarming with ghosts and goblins. You have reason in shutting it up. I assure you, no one will thank you for a doze in such a den. What do you mean? Asked Heathcliff. And what are you doing? Lie down and finish out the night, since you are here, but for heaven's sake, don't repeat that horrid noise. Nothing could excuse it unless you were having your throat cut. Oh, it's just the little fiend had got in the window. She probably would have strangled me, I returned. I'm not going to endure the persecutions of your hospitable ancestors again. Was not the Reverend Jabez Branderham akin to you on the mother's side? And that minx, Catherine Linden, or Earnshire, or whatever she was called. Oh, she must have been channeling a wicked little soul. She told me she had been out walking on the earth these 20 years, just a punishment for her mortal transgressions. I have no doubt. Well, scarcely were these words uttered when I recollected the association of Heathcliff's with Catherine's name in the book, which had completely slipped from my memory, moron, till thus awakened. I blushed at my inconsideration, but without showing further consciousness of the offense, I hastened to add, and the truth is, sir, I passed the first part of the night in, and here I stopped afresh. I was about to say pursuing these old volumes when it would have revealed my knowledge of their written, as well as their pointed contents. So, correcting myself, I went on, in spelling over the names scratched on the window ledge. Yes, in a monotonous occupation, calculated to set me asleep, like counting or... what can you mean by talking to me this way to me? Thundered Heathcliff with savage vehemence. How dare you? Under my roof? God! He's mad to speak so, and he struck his forehead with rage. Well, I didn't know whether to resent this language or pursue my explanation, but he seemed so powerfully affected that I took pity, and proceeded with my dreams, affirming that I had never heard the appellation of Catherine Linton before, but reading it often overproduced an impression which personified itself when I had no longer my imagination under control. Heathcliff gradually fell back into the shelter of the bed as I spoke, finally sitting down, almost concealed behind it, I guessed. However, by his irregular and intercepted breathing, now that he struggled to vanquish an excess of violent emotion, not liking to show him that I had heard the conflict, I continued my toilette rather noisily. What? Oh, I thought maybe he pulled out a bedpan and just took a dump in front of him. Looked at my watch and soliloquized on the length of the night. I still like the idea that he's squatting over a bedpan and just taking a shit while he says, "Not 3 o'clock yet. I could have taken oath it would have been 6. Time stagnates here. We must surely have retired to rest at 8. Always at 9 in the winter, rise at 4, said my host, suppressing a groan. And as I fancied by the motion of his arm's shadow, dashing a tear from his eyes, Mr. Lockwood, he added, you may go into my room. You'll only be in the way coming downstairs so early, and your childish outcry has sent sleep to devil for me. Oh, and for me, too, I replied. I'll walk in the yard till daylight. Then I'll be off. And you need not dread a repetition of my intrusion. I am now quite cursed of seeking pleasure in society, be it country or town. A sensible man ought to find sufficient company in himself. Delightful company, muttered Heathcliff. Oh, take candle and go where you please, and I shall join you directly. Keep out of the yard, though. The dogs are unchained. The house, Juno mounts sentinel there. And, nay, you can ramble about the steps and passages, but away with you, and I'll come in 2 minutes. I obeyed. So far as to quit the chamber, and then, ignorant to where the narrow lobbies led, I stood still and was witness, involuntarily, to a piece of superstition on the part of my landlord, which belied oddly, his apparent sense. He got out of bed and wrenched open the lattice, bursting as he pulled at it, into an uncontrollable passion of tears. Come in, he sobbed. Kathy, do come. Oh, do, once more. Oh, my heart's darling. Yeah, hear me this time. Catherine, at last. And the specter showed a specter's ordinary caprice. It gave no sign of being, but the snow and the wind whirled wildly through, even reaching my station and blowing out the light. There was such anguish in the gush of grief that accompanied his raving that my compassion made me overlook its folly, and I drew off, half angry to have listened at all, and vexed at having related my ridiculous nightmare, since it produced that agony, though why was beyond my comprehension, and I descended cautiously to the lower regions, and I landed in the back kitchen where a gleam of fire, raked complacently together, enabled me to rekindle my candle. Nothing was stirring except a bridled gray cat, which crept from the ashes and saluted me with querulous mew. Oh, phlegm. 2 benches, shaped in sections of a circle, nearly enclosed the hearth. On one of those I stretched myself, and Grimalkin mounted the other. Oh, we both of us were nodding ere anyone invaded our retreat, and then it was Joseph, shuffling down a wooden ladder that vanished in the roof, through a trap. The ascent to his garret, I suppose. He cast a sinister look at the little flame, which I had enticed to play between the ribs, swept the cat from its elevation, and bestowing himself in the vacancy, commenced the operation of stuffing a 3-inch pipe with tobacco. My presence in this sanctum was evidently esteemed a piece of impudence, too shameful to remark. He silently applied the tube to his lips, folded his arms, puffed away, and I let him enjoy the luxury unannoyed, and after sucking out his last wreath and having a profound sigh, he got up and departed as solemnly as he came. A more elastic footstep entered next, and now I opened my mouth for a good morning, but closed it again, his salutation unachieved, for Hareton Enshaw was performing his Orson sotto voce in a series of curses directed against every object he touched, while he rummaged sotto voce, in case anyone doesn't know. I don't know why I know this, but now I feel like I gotta say something, because I actually know something, and I want to brag about it. It just means in a quiet voice. I use it all the time just to sound like an asshole. They go, can you tell me about your work today? Do it sotto voce. And then they say, what does that mean? And I go, anyways, he glanced over the back of the bench, dilating his nostrils, as though a little exchanging of civilities with me as my companion, the cat. And I guessed by his preparations that egress was allowed, and leaving my hard couch, made a movement to follow him. Oh, he noticed this, and he thrust the inner door with the end of his spade, intimating by an articulate sound that there was a place where I must go if I changed my locality. It opened into the house where the females were already astir, Zilla urging flakes of flame up the chimney with a colossal bellows, and Mrs. Heathcliff kneeling on the hearth, reading a book by the aid of the blaze, and she held her hand interposed between the furnace heat and her eyes, as she seemed absorbed in her occupation, detesting from it only to chide the servant for covering her with sparks, and to push away a dog, and now and then, and snoozled, that's a word, I'm not looking it up, its nose forwardly into her face. Well, I was surprised to see Heathcliff there also, and he stood by the fire, his back toward me, just finishing a stormy scene with poor Zilla. Oh! Whoever at anon interrupted her labor to pluck up the cord of her apron, and heave an indignant groan. And you worthless, he broke out as I entered, turning to his daughter-in-law and employing an epithet as harmless as duck or sheep, but generally represented by a dash. I don't know what any of that was I just read. There you are, at your idle tricks again. The rest of them do earn their bread, and you live in my charity. Put your trash away and find something to do. Oh, you shall pay me for the plague of having you eternally in my sight. Do you hear? Damnable jade! I put my trash away, because you can make it if I refuse, answered the young lady, closing her book and throwing it on the chair. Oh, but I'll do anything, though you should swear your tongue out except to what I please. Oh, Heathcliff lifted his hand. Oh, the speaker sprang to a safer distance, obviously acquainted with its weight. Having no desire to be entertained by cat and dog combat, I stepped forward briskly, as if eager to partake in the warmth of the hearth and innocent of any knowledge of the interrupted dispute. Each had the decorum to suspend further hostilities, and Heathcliff placed his fists, out of temptation, in his pockets. Mrs. Heathcliff curled her lip and walked to a seat far off, where she kept her word by playing the part of a statue during the remainder of my stay. Well, that was not long. I declined joining their breakfast, and at first gleam of dawn took the opportunity of escaping to a free air, now clear and still, as cold as impalpable ice. My landlord hallooed for me to stop ere I reached the bottom of the garden, and offered to accompany me across the moor. I'm not editing any of this throat clearing out. I'm sick, and you're here, and I'm not feeling good, so you're just going to have to hear it. It was, well, he did, for the whole hill back was one billowy white ocean. The swells and falls not indicating corresponding rises and depressions of the ground. Many pits, at least, were filled to a level, and entire ranges of mounds. The refuse of the quarries, blotted from the chart which my yesterday's walk left pictured in my mind. I had remarked on one side of the road, at intervals of 6 or 7 yards, a line of upright stones continued through the whole length of the barren. These were erected and daubed with lime on purpose to serve their guides in the dark, and also, when a fall like the present confounded the deep swamps on either hand with the farmer's path, but excepting a dirty dot pointing up here and there, all traces of their existence had vanished, and my companion found it necessary to warn me frequently to steer right or left, and when I imagined I was following correctly the windings of the road. We exchanged a little conversation. Eddie halted at the entrance of Thrushcross Park, saying I could make no error there. Our adieux were limited to a hasty bow, and then I pushed forward, trusting my own resources, for the Potter's Lodge was untenanted as yet, and the distance from the gate to the Grange is 2 miles, and I believe I managed to make it 4, what with losing myself among the trees. And sinking up to the neck in snow. What? A predicament which only those who have experienced it can appreciate. That's supposed to have really happened. At any rate, whatever were my wanderings, the clock chimed 12 as I entered the house, and that gave exactly an hour for every mile the usual way from Wuthering Heights. My human fixture and her satellites rushed to welcome me, exclaiming tumultuously that they had completely given up on me. Everyone conjectured that I perished last night, and that they were wondering how they must set about the search for my remains. And I bid them be quiet now. And so we returned, and benumbed to my heart, I dragged upstairs, whence, after putting on dry clothes, and pacing to and fro 30 or 40 minutes to restore the animal heat, I adjourned to the study, feeble as a kitten, almost too much so to enjoy the cheerful fire and the smoking coffee which the servant had prepared for my refreshment. Chapter 4. What vain weathercocks are we! Exclamation point. I, who had determined to hold myself independent of all social intercourse, and thanked my stars that, at length, I had lighted on a spot where it was next to impracticable. I, weak wretch, after maintaining till dusk a struggle with low spirits and solitude, was finally compelled to strike my colors, burp, and under pretense of gaining information concerning the necessities of my establishment, I desired Miss Dean, when she brought in supper, to sit down while I ate it, hoping sincerely she would prove a regular gossip, and either rouse me to animation or lull me to sleep by her talk. I have lived here a considerable time, I commenced. Did you not, say 16 years? 18, sir. I came when the mistress was married, to wait on her. After she died, the master retained me for his housekeeper. Indeed. There ensued a pause. And she was not a gossip, I feared, unless about her own affairs, and those could hardly interest me. Oh, wow, what a dick. However, after having studied for an interval, with a fist on either knee, and a cloud of meditation over her ruddy countenance, she ejaculated. Times are greatly changed since then. Yes, I remarked. You've seen a good many alterations, I suppose. I have, and troubles too, she said. Oh, I'll turn the talk on my landlord's family, I thought to myself. Good subject to start. And that pretty girl widow, I should like to know her history. And yes. Whether she be a native of the country or is more probable, an exotic, eh? That surly indigne will not recognize for kin. With this intention, I asked Miss Dean why Heathcliff let Thrushcross Range as preferred living in the situation of residence so much inferior. Is he not rich enough to keep the estate in good order? I inquired. Rich, sir! Exclamation point, she returned. He has nobody knows what money. Okay, whatever. And every year it increases. Yes. He's rich enough to live in a finer house than this. But he's not very near, close-handed. And if he had meant to flit to Thrushcross Range as soon, I don't know why I can't say Thrushcross. Thrushcross. When I say it fast, it's Thrushcross. Weird. That's just how I'm reading it from now on. Just accept that. I have a cold. As soon as he heard a good tenant, he could not have borne to miss the chance of getting a few hundreds more. Oh, it's strange people should be so greedy, when they're alone in the world. He had a son, it seems. Yes, he had one, and he's dead. And that young lady, Miss Heathcliff, is his widow? Yes. Where did she come from originally? Why, sir, she is my late master's daughter. Catherine Linton was her maiden name. I nursed her, poor thing. I did wish Mr. Heathcliff would remove here, and then we might have been together again. What? Catherine Linton, I exclaimed, astonished, but a minute's reflection convinced me that it was not my ghostly Catherine. Then, I continued, my predecessor's name was Linton? It was. Who is that? Earnshaw? Hareton Earnshaw, who lives with Mr. Heathcliff? Are they relations? No, he is late Mrs. Linton's nephew. The young lady's cousin, then? Yes, and her husband was also her cousin, too. One of the mothers on the other side of the father's side, Heathcliff married Mr. Linton's sister. Yeah, I see the house at Wuthering Heights has Earnshaw carved over the front door. Are they an old family? Yes, very old, sir, said Hareton, is the last of them. As our Miss Cathy is of us, I mean of the Lintons. Have you been to Wuthering Heights? I beg pardon for asking, but I should like to hear how it is. Mrs. Heathcliff? She looked very well and very handsome, yet I think not very happy. Oh, dear, I don't wonder. And how'd you like the master? Rough fellow, rather, Miss Dean. Is that not his character? Rough as a saw edge, and hard as whinstone. Oh, the less you meddle with him, the better. He must have had some ups and downs in life to make him such a churl, eh? Do you know anything about his history? Oh, it's a cuckoo, sir. Oh, I know all about it, except that where he was born and who his parents were, but how he got his money at first. And Hareton has been cast out like an unfledged dunnock. I don't know what half a cuckoo and a dunnock. The unfortunate lad is the only one in all this parish that does not guess how he has been cheated. Well, Miss Dean, it'll be charitable deed to tell something about the neighbors. I feel I should not rest if I go to bed, so be good enough to sit and chat for an hour? Oh, certainly, sir. Oh, I'll fetch a little sewing, and then I'll sit as long as you please. But you've caught cold. I saw you shivering, and you must have some gruel to drive it out. The worthy woman bustled off. Well, now she's a worthy woman. Bustled off. And I crouched nearer the fire, and my head felt hot, and the rest of me chill. Moreover, I was excited. Almost to a pitch of foolishness, though my nerves and brain, and this caused me to feel, not uncomfortable, but rather fearful, as I am still, of serious effects from the incidents of today and yesterday. She returned presently, bringing a smoking basin and a basket of work, and having placed the former on the hob, drew in her seat, evidently pleased to find me so companionable. Before I came to live here, she commenced, waiting no further invitation to her story. I was almost always at Wuthering Heights, because my mother had nursed Mr. Hindley Earnshaw. Oh, that'd be the H dot that we were hearing about earlier, I think. Oh, that was Hareton's father, and I got used to playing with the children. Oh, I ran errands, too, and helped make hay, and hung about the farm, ready for anything that anybody could set me to. Oh, one fine summer morning. It was the beginning of harvest. breakfast, I remember. Mr. Earnshaw, the old master, came downstairs dressed for a journey. And after he had told Joseph what was to be done during the day, he returned to Hindley and Kathy and me, for I sat eating my porridge with them. And he said, speaking to his son, now, my bonny man, I'm going to Liverpool today. Hey, what shall I bring you? Oh, you may choose what you like, only let it be little, for I shall walk here, walk back, 60 miles each way. Oh, that's a long spell. That is a long spell. Hindley, can you do that in a day? You can't do that in a day. Hindley named a fiddle, and when he asked Miss Kathy, she was hardly 6 years old, but she could ride any horse in the stable, and she chose a whip. Oh, he did not forget me, for he had a kind heart, though he was rather severe sometimes. He promised to bring me a pocket full of apples and pears, and then he kissed his children, said goodbye, and set off. It seemed a long while for us, 3 days, that makes more sense, of his absence, and often did little Kathy ask when he'd be home. Mrs. Earnshaw expected him by supper time on the third evening, but she put the meal off for an hour after hour, and there were no signs of his coming. However, and at last the children got tired of running down to the gate to look, and then it grew dark. She would have put them to bed, but they begged, sadly, to be allowed to stay up. At just about 7 o'clock, the door latch was raised, quietly, and in stepped the master. Oh, he threw himself into the chair, laughing and groaning, and bid them all stand off, for he was nearly killed. Oh, he would have such another walk. He would not have such another walk for 3 kingdoms. And at the end of the night of it to be flighted to death, he said, opening his great coat, which he held bundled up in his arms. See here, wife, I was never so beaten with anything in my life, but you must e'en take it as a gift of God, though it is as dark almost as if it came from the devil. Well, we crowded around, and over Miss Kathy's head I had a peep at a dirty, ragged, black-haired child. Oh, big enough both to walk and talk. Indeed, his face looked older than Catherine's, yet when it was set on its feet, it only stared around. It repeated over and over again some gibberish that nobody could understand. Well, I was frightened, and Mrs. Earnshaw was ready to fling it out the doors. She did fly up, asking how he could fashion to bring that Romane brat into the house when they had their own barns to feed and fend for. What he meant to do with it, and whether he were mad, and the master tried to explain the matter, but he was really half dead with fatigue, and then all I could make out amongst her scolding was a tale of seeing it starving and houseless, as good as dumb, in the streets of Liverpool, where he picked it up and inquired for its owner. Not a soul knew whom he belonged, he said, and his money and time both being limited, he thought it better to take it home with him at once, You can just do that, just grab a kid off the street and goes, anyone own this kid? And everyone's like, I don't know that kid. And he's like, I'm bringing this kid home. He thought it better to take it home with him at once and run into vain expenses there, because he was determined he should not leave it where he found it. It's a human, it's not an it. Well, the conclusion was that my mistress grumbled herself calm, and Mr. Earnshaw told me to wash it and give it clean things and let it sleep with the children. Hindley and Kathy contented themselves with looking and listening till peace was restored. Then both began searching their father's pockets for the presents. He had promised them. The former was a boy of 14. But then he drew out what he had been a fiddle, crushed to morsels in the great coat. Oh, he blubbered aloud. And Kathy, when she learned the master had lost her whip in attending to the stranger, showed her humor by grinning and spitting at the stupid little thing. Wow, what a bunch of dicks. Earning her for her pains, a sound blow from her father. Wow, and he's abusive. To teach her cleaner manners. They entirely refused to have it in bed with them, or even in their room. And I had no more sense, so I put it on the landing of the stairs and hoped it might be gone in the morrow. By chance, or else attracted by hearing his voice, it crept to Mr. Earnshaw's door, and there he found it quitting his chamber. Inquiries were made as to how it got there, and I obliged to confess, and in recompense for my cowardice and inhumanity was sent out of the house. This was Heathcliff's first introduction to the family. And on coming back a few days afterwards, for I did not consider my banishment perpetual, I found that he had christened him Heathcliff, and it was the name of a son who died in childhood, as it has served him ever since, both for Christian and surname. Miss Kathy and he were now very thick, but Hindley hated him. To say the truth, I did the same, and we plagued and we went on with him shamefully, for I wasn't reasonable enough to feel my injustice, and the mistress never put on a word on his behalf when she saw him wronged. He seemed, sullen, patient child, hardened, perhaps, to ill treatment, and he would stand Hindley's blows without winking or shedding a tear, while he's just beating up on every kid. And my pinches moved him only to draw in a breath and open his eyes, and if he had hurt himself by accident, and no one was to blame. This endurance made old Earnshaw furious, and when he discovered his son persecuting the poor fatherless child, as he called him, he took to Heathcliff strangely, believing all he said. And for that matter, he said precious little, and generally the truth, and petting him up far above Cathy, who was too mischievous and wayward for a favorite. From the very beginning, he bred bad feeling in the house, and at Miss Earnshaw's death, which happened in less than 2 years after, the young master had learned to regard his father as an oppressor rather than a friend, and Heathcliff as a usurper of his parents' affections and his privileges. And he grew bitter and brooding over these injuries, and I sympathized, a while, but when the children fell ill of the measles, and I had to tend to them, and to take on me the cares of a woman at once, I changed my idea. Heathcliff was dangerously sick. And while he lay at the worst, he could have me constantly by his pillow. And I suppose he felt I did a good deal for him, and he hadn't a wit to guess that I was compelled to do it. However, I will say this. He was the quietest child that ever nursed watch over. The difference between him and the others forced me to be less partial. Cathy and her brother harassed me terribly. He, in italics, was as uncomplaining as a little lamb. Through hardness, not gentleness, made him give little trouble. He got through, and the doctor affirmed it was a great measure owing to me. That's got to be nice. And praised for me and my care. That's got to be great. And I was vain of his accommodations, and softened toward being by those who means I earned them. And thus Hindley lost his last ally. Still, I couldn't dote on Heathcliff, and I wondered often what my master saw to admire so much in the sullen boy, who never, to my recollection, repaid his indulgence by any sign of gratitude. Well, he's not insolent to his benefactor. He was simply insensible. Though knowing perfectly that the hold he had on his heart, and the conscious that he was only to speak, and all the house was to be obliged to bend to his wishes. As an instance, I remember Mr. Earnshaw once caught a couple of colts at the parish fair, and gave the lads each one, And Heathcliff took the handsomest, of course. But it fell lame. That's too bad. And anyway, and when he discovered it, he said to Hindley, you must exchange your horses with me. I don't like mine. And if you won't, I shall tell your father of the 3 thrashings you've given me this week, and show him my arm, which is black to the shoulder. Hindley put out his tongue and cuffed him over the ears. You better do it at once, he persisted, escaping to the porch. They were in the stable. You will have to. And if I speak of these blows, you'll get them again with interest. Off, dog, cried Hindley, threatening him with an iron weight used for weighing potatoes and hay. Throw it, he replied, standing still. And then I'll tell you how you boasted that you would turn me out of the doors as soon as he died. And see whether he will not turn you out directly. Well, Hindley threw it, hitting him on the breast, and down he fell, but staggered up immediately, breathless and white. And had I not prevented it, he would have gone just so to the master, and got full revenge by letting his condition plead for him, intimating who had caused it. Take my colt, Romane, then, said young Earnshaw, and I pray that he may break your neck. Take him, and be damned, you beggarly interloper, and wheedle my father out of all he has. Only afterwards, show him what you are, imp of Satan, and take that, and I hope he'll kick you out of your brains. Heathcliff had gone to lose the beast and shift it to his own stall. He was passed behind it when Hindley finished his speech by knocking him under its feet. Without stopping to examine whether his hopes were fulfilled, he ran away as fast as he could. And I was surprised to witness how coolly the child gathered himself up and went on with his intention, exchanging saddles and all, and then sitting down on a bundle of hay to overcome the qualm which the violent blow had occasioned before he entered the house. And I persuaded him easily to let me lay blame of the bruises on the horse. He minded little what he was told, since he had got what he wanted. He complained so seldom, and indeed of such stirs as these, that I really thought him not vindictive, and I was deceived completely, as you will hear. Chapter 5. In the course of time, Mr. Earnshaw began to fail. He had been active and healthy, yet his strength left him suddenly, and when he was confined to the chimney corner, he grew grievously irritable. A nothing vexed him, and he suspected slights of his authority, nearly threw him into fits, and he was especially to be remarked if anyone attempted to impose upon or domineer over his favorite. He was painfully jealous lest a word should be spoken amiss to him, seeming to have got into his head the notion that because he liked Heathcliff, all hated and longed to do him ill turn. That was a disadvantage to the lad, for the kinder among us did not wish to fret the master, so he humored his partiality, and that humoring was rich nourishment to the child's pride and black tempers. Still, it became a matter of necessity twice, or thrice, Hindley's manifestation of scorn, while his father was near, roused the old man to fury. He seized his stick to strike him, and shook with rage that he could not do it. At last, our curate, which we had a curate then who made the living answer to teaching the little Lintons and the Earnshaws, and farming his bit of land himself, and parentheses, man, that's a lot to stick in parentheses, advised that the young man should be sent to college. Mr. Earnshaw agreed, though with heavy spirit, for he said Hindley was not, and would never thrive as where he wandered, and I hoped heartily that he should have pace now. It hurt me to think the master should be made uncomfortable by his own good deed. I fancied the discontent of age and disease arose from his family disagreements, as he would have had thought it did. Really, sir, it was in the sinking frame. We might have got on tolerably notwithstanding, but for two people, Miss Cathy and Joseph, the servant, you saw him, I dare say, up yonder. He was, and is yet, most likely, the wearisome most, self-righteous Pharisee, that ever ransacked a Bible to rake in the promises to himself and fling the curses to his neighbors. By his knack of sermonizing and pious discoursing, he contrived to make a great impression on Mr. Earnshaw, and the more feeble the master became, the more influence he gained. He was relentless in worrying him about his soul's concerns, and about ruling his children rigidly. He encouraged him to regard Hindley as a reprobate, and night after night he regularly grumbled out a long string of tales against Heathcliff and Catherine, always minding to flatter Earnshaw's weakness by heaping the heaviest blame on the latter. Certainly he had ways with her such as I had never saw a child take up before, and he put all of us past our patience. 50 times, and oftener in a day, from the hour she came downstairs to the hour she went to bed, we had not a minute's security that she wouldn't be in mischief. Her spirits were always at high water mark. Her tongue was always going, singing, laughing, and plaguing everybody who would not do the same. A wild, wicked slip she was. Wicked slip. She was the bonniest eye. What's with bonniest? I've seen Bonnie multiple times now. I'm going to look that one up. That's an actual genuine lookup. Bonnie, also known as chiefly Scottish. A beautiful Bonnie lass. So she's just Scottish. Okay. She had a Scottish eye, the sweetest smile, the lightest foot in the parish, and after all, I believe she meant no harm. For when she once made you cry in good earnest, it seldom happened that she would not keep you company, and oblige you to be quiet, that you might comfort her. She was too fond of Heathcliff. The greatest punishment we could invent for her was to keep her separate from him, and yet she got chided more than any of us on his account. In play, she liked exceedingly to act like the little mistress, using her hands freely and commanding her companions. And she did so to me, and I would not bear slapping and ordering, and so I let her know. Now, Mr. Earnshaw did not understand jokes from his children. He had always been strict and grave with them. And Catherine, on her part, had no idea why her father would be crosser and less patient in his ailing condition than when he was in his prime. His peevish reproofs wakened her a naughty delight to provoke him, and she was never so happy as when we were all scolding her at once. She was defying us with her bold, saucy look and her ready words, turning Joseph's religious curses into ridicule, baiting me and doing just what her father hated most, showing how she pretended insolence, which he thought was real, had more power over Heathcliff than his kindness. Oh, how the boy would do her bidding in anything, and his only when it suited his own inclination. After behaving as badly as possible all day, she sometimes came fondling, what is with the hands and the fondling, to make it up at night. Nay, Cathy, the old man would say, I cannot love thee. Thou art worse than thy brother. Go, say thy prayers, child, and ask God's pardon. I doubt thy mother and I must rue that we ever reared thee. That made her cry at first, and then being repulsed continually hardened her, and then she laughed as if I told her to say she was sorry for her faults and begged to be forgiven. But the hour came, at last, that ended Mr. Earnshaw's troubles on earth. He died quietly in his chair one October evening, seated by the fireside. A high wind blustered around the house and roared in the chimney. It sounded wild and stormy, yet it was not cold. We were all there together, I, little removed from the hearth, busy at my knitting, and Joseph reading his Bible near the table, for the servants generally sat in the house then after the work was done. Miss Cathy had been sick, and that made her still. She leant against her father's knee, and Heathcliff was lying on the floor with his head in her lap. And I remember the master, before he fell into a doze, stroking her bonny hair. Oh, we know it's Scottish now. And it pleased him rarely to see her gentle, and saying, Why canst thou not always be a good lass, Cathy? And she turned her face up to his, and laughed, and answered, Why cannot you always be a good man, father? But as soon as she saw him vexed again, she kissed his hand, and then she said she would sing him to sleep. And she began singing, kind of very low, till his fingers dropped from hers, and his head sank on her breast. Then I told her to hush and not to stir for fear that she would wake him. And we all kept as mute as mice for, a full half hour. And then she should have done so long early. Joseph, having finished his chapter, got up and said that he must rouse the master for prayers in bed. Well, he stepped forward and called him by name, touched his shoulder, but he would not move. So he took a candle and looked at him, and I thought there was something wrong, as he set down the light and, seizing the children by each arm, whispered to them to frame upstairs and make little din. They might pray alone that evening. He had summit to do, S-U-M-M-U-T. What's that? Looking it up? Nothing. All right, well, I'm just going to say it's Summit Beer. I shall bid father good night first, said Catherine, putting her arms around his neck. And before we could hinder her, the poor thing discovered her loss directly. And she screamed out, Oh, he's dead! Heathcliff, he's dead! Yeah, and they both set up heartbreaking cries. I joined my wail to theirs, loud and bitter. But Joseph asked, what we could be thinking of to roar in such a way over a saint in heaven. Well, he told me to put on my cloak and run to Gimmerton for the doctor or the parson, and I could not guess the use of either would be of then, and however I went through the wind and the rain and brought one, the doctor, back with me, and the other said that he'd come in the morning. Leaving Joseph to explain the matters, I ran to the children's room. Their door was ajar, and I saw that they had never lain down, though it was past midnight, but they were calmer, and did not need me to console them. The little souls were comforting each other with better thoughts than I could have hit on. No person in the world had ever pictured heaven so beautifully as they did in their innocent talk, and while I sobbed and listened, I could not help wishing we were all there safe together. Well, there you go. I read the first 5 chapters. Why don't we go downstairs to the smoking room and enjoy a cigarette and talk about what we just learned. Well, there you are, turd. Why don't you take a seat and enjoy one of our favorite Camel cigarettes. Here, have one. I can't have one because I've already got a horrible cough and a stuffy nose. Oh, that's right. My wife put birds down here. I say this every time. Let's review what we just read. First of all, I'd like to say that death scene was weirdly kind of sweet. little kids snuggling up their dad, who they both hate and also love at the same time. He's a horrible man that keeps beating his kids, but it's in this book, I guess it's just normal. I guess parents just did that a lot back then. I don't know. But so what do we learn? As I've stolen from Spark Notes, this book starts out confusing as hell. You're being thrown into a lot of characters and a convoluted family tree, which makes it hard to follow. Oh, there are 2 Catherines, for God's sake. To make it even more confusing, this is being narrated from multiple angles. It's a diary entry of someone who's being told the story by another person, which is what we just read in this last chapter. Or it's the diary entry of what he can recall from reading one of Catherine's diary entries. So instead of making Catherine, Nellie, or Lockwood unbiased, so you could actually get the truth about everything that's going on, the cruelty and the abuse, Emily Brontë decided to write this more realistically, where you get the point of view of someone who will exaggerate or misunderstand an event or even gossip unfairly. Lockwood, for example, in the beginning thought that Heathcliff was some kind of cultured aristocrat and was just so impressed by him. And it took him a long time to figure out that he's just a crabby piece of shit that owns a lot of dogs for some reason. So how he views the situation isn't reliable, and Nellie will talk about others' cruelty and gloss over her own selfishness. We're going to have to read between the lines on a lot of stuff going on in this book, which is tough. Did Lockwood really experience Catherine's ghost while half asleep? He, in his dream, broke the window and then grabbed her, or her arm grabbed his, and then he was trying to break free, so he kind of took her wrist and dragged it along the broken glass of the window pane till it was bleeding everywhere. I don't remember him actually going back to look at the glass pane. He said the books got pushed over, that he piled up against the window, but did he actually turn and look to see if he dreamt it? We don't know, so that's unreliable as hell. His character is so emotional and fussed that you can't know for sure if he just got swept up in the drama of reading her diary before going to sleep. And like the history of Gothic literature I had gone over in the 7th Virgin episodes, this book has all the expected stuff. Gloomy environments, ghosts, creepy mansions, weird, selfish characters. One's hyper-religious, the other one's mean and jerkish. And then the other one, basically everyone's mean and jerkish, even the religious character. So it's kind of got all your standards, and it's been an enjoyable read so far. For the first time, I have a 2-hour-long episode that didn't bother me so much when I was reading it. 7th Virgin was well written, but it was just more of a drag as you're going through it. So it's kind of bugging me, and I could feel how long this was taking. One thing that was bugging me is they kept talking about Heathcliff being dark, and I couldn't really figure out what that was supposed to mean. And so I had to look it up, because they're kind of vague about it. Like dark, like they hear about Irish people being dark, and that just means they have black hair. So what does that mean exactly? Well, I looked this up on theconversation.com. It says the novel's most famous action takes place in the moorlands surrounding the quaint Yorkshire village of Haworth. The moorlands are traditionally associated with uncivilized regions. Heathcliff embodies this idea. He is depicted as the quintessential savage whose foreignness establishes his position at civilization's periphery. But historians have found abundant evidence to suggest that Heathcliff's foreignness is not merely symbolic, it makes historical sense. The novel is set in 1801, when Liverpool handled most of Britain's transatlantic slave trades, and evidence in this terrible trade can be found everywhere. The Brontë critic Humphrey Gawthorpe records that Wilberforce's colleague Thomas Clinton, saw in the window of a Liverpool shop leg shackles, handcuffs, thumb screws, and mouth openers. Ugh. I mean, all the rest are horrible. What the hell's a mouth opener? For force feeding used on board the slavers. Oh my God. So if Heathcliff was not a black African or descendant of one, historians have comprehensively demonstrated that he very easily might have been. And while the recurrent critical question has been whether Brontë meant him to be black, research on Yorkshire's black histories make it more pertinent to ask, why was he not depicted as black until recently as 2012? In the late 1970s, a Latin American television adaptation of Wuthering Heights, entitled Cumbres Boricausis portrayed Heathcliff as the mixed-race son of Mr. Earnshaw. So, there you go. He was probably actually really black for real, which explains why all the kids refused to sleep with him, how this poor kid just seemed confused when he, brought him home and dumped him in the living room. This poor kid has probably traveled the world against his will, and he's terrified. So, there you go. We learned something new. Well, with that, I suppose I'll see you next week, where I read chapters 6 through 9. Well, it appears you found me in the part of the podcast I hate the most, where I tell you all about the places on the internet where you can find me. You can tell I hate this because of the sound effects making it sound like a stormy night in the drawing room of the damned. Now, there's that. Are you cool? I like cool people. It's the reason why I got involved in this business to begin with, just to meet cool people, not losers. So if you're cool, feel free to go over to my website, nuzzlehouse.com, which just points you to my link tree. Everything's on the link tree. Just go to the link tree if you want to see where I am. And of course, Linktree has the dumbest URL in the world. linktr.ee/nuzzlehouse. It's the dumbest thing. If you go to nuzzlehouse.com, it's just going to reroute you over there after giving you some weird error about it not being secure. I hate it. I hate the internet. But if you go there, you get to hear some of the other stuff that I and my wife work on, like the Radio Mystery Theater show, where we try to recreate the same show that used to be on in the 70s, but they don't make any episodes anymore. So we make our own, and we just steal all their commercials. And also, just in the curious mind, we made a Christmas album. If you go to our link tree, you can see that we made a Christmas album. It's the first thing we did after getting married, which I think everyone should do when they get married, is start talking about the Christmas album they're going to make. And we're working on a new show where we give relationship advice by reading paranormal smut. And since I think you might be cool, you can always just email me directly, glenn.nuzzles@gmail.com. But don't email if you're a nerdling or a dork. Now, back to business. Can't believe I drank all of them already. There's got to be one left.